Now I'd like to look at the grading for question 1. So there's a separate video where I've explained the correct answers, and now I want to go through one way to grade it. Now I didn't write this, and I'm not going to write the AP test, so we may have differences of opinion on what something should count for or how important something is, but it's critical that you've written a complete answer, and that's because you don't know exactly how they're going to grade it. So here's how the author of this exam chose to grade it. On number 1, we got 2 points possible, so go through and give yourself a grade for each of these parts according to the rubric that's here. 1 point for this answer, that 0.71 or 5/7, and 1 point for work that leads to that. So we don't want any naked answers, just numbers floating there. You could have a Venn diagram. You could have a correct formula where you've screwed up some numbers and you could get the point for the work but not a point for the answer. On letter B, again, it's worth 2 points. You've either clearly stated you're going to do it as a geometric or a binomial problem, and you've got an answer. Now, it says that you could leave your answer in an unsimplified form, which means if you wrote this, they would give you credit, even if you didn't calculate it out to give you this. And likewise with the calculator notation, they're going to accept that provided that you clearly said where these numbers came from. So don't assume that they understand geometric CDF. They want to know that you know that that 0.2 is the probability and that 5 is that number right there. Letter C is for 3 points, 1 point for talking about the mean, 1 point for talking about the standard deviation, and 1 point for talking about a normal approximation with justification. So you've got to have that justification to get the normal curve, or the point for the normal curve. Number 4, or letter D, they called 4 points. 1 point for correctly assigning random digits. You wouldn't necessarily have to do it the way I did, but 93% of your digits need to go with on time. You need to have a stopping rule in here, so I said we're going to select 70 pairs of numbers. Somewhere in there you've got to tell them where to stop. You don't get that if you say numbers can't repeat. In this example, the numbers can repeat because they represent the probability of something happening. We get 1 point for stating what constitutes a success, and 1 point for saying, do this a whole bunch of times so we can get a better estimate. Letter E is worth 2 points, 1 point for correctly stating the explanatory variable, and 1 point for correctly stating the response variable. Letter F is only worth 1 point. You can't simply say no, however, you've got to say that a treatment wasn't imposed or something along those lines, a justification for why it's not an experiment. Letter G is worth 2 points, 1 point for pairing the students with themselves, that's the matched pair, and 1 point for telling me what it is that we're going to compare. So we've got to get their before and after if we wanted to use that matched pairs design. Letter H, checking the conditions. It's worth 3 points. 1 point for mentioning random samples, 1 point for checking the 10% rule, and 1 point for checking normality with the values plugged in. You don't have the values, you don't get the point. Letter I is worth 3 points. 3 points for a correct interpretation of the interval. That was the first sentence. 1 point for that. 1 point for saying there's no evidence of a difference. And 1 point for the context. In other words, talking about schools and completion rates. I think that's a total of 25 points. And we'll combine that with the score on the other problem, or the other part, to get a rough idea of a grade for this assignment. That'll be in a different video.